So good evening, everybody. Just while we're waiting for people to join, I will let you know that my name is Jo, and this is my first time hosting the Art Deco webinar. So apologies if I make any mistakes. We should be starting any minute. I think the participant numbers still coming up. While waiting for people to join, I'll let you know that you can join the Art Deco Society UK for only £15 a year, and renewals are only £10 a person, and they can be completed by logging on with your email. And while the webinar is going on, I will put the address for you to join or to renew in the chat. So I think that the participant numbers have stabilized a little bit, so I'm going to move on and introduce the webinar this evening and let you know how it's going to work. So the title of this evening's webinar is Makeup Moderne, the Art Deco Influence in Cosmetics Design. And I'm very excited about it, as this is an area of Art Deco life that I am not very familiar with. Our speaker this evening is Hilary Belzer, and she is the founder and curator of the Makeup Museum, a virtual museum that she established in 2008. This is dedicated to the preservation, research and exhibition of cosmetics from antiquity through to the 21st century. The Makeup Museum is a progressive, unique space that explores makeup design and packaging, culture and history from all eras. With a bachelor's degree in art history and a master's degree in cultural studies, as well as professional experience in several major cultural institutions, including the Walters Art Museum and the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Hilary ensures the Makeup Museum is a leader in conceptualizing new ways of thinking about makeup and its cultural and artistic significance. Specialties include the overlap of fine art and makeup, 90s cosmetics, and the little-known makeup histories. So I'm going to hand over to Hilary. She's going to talk for about 50 minutes or so. If you have any questions to pose to Hilary, please put them in the chat. And when she's finished giving us what I think is going to be a fascinating talk, I will then pose those questions on your behalf. So I'm going to hand over to Hilary now. It's all yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to say this is going to be a pretty broad overview. As you know, both Art Deco history and makeup history are pretty vast. So this will be a more high-level look at Art Deco makeup. So I want to start by giving a bit of background about cosmetics during the time when Deco was emerging. In the late 19-teens and early 20s, makeup usage increased exponentially. There are a lot of reasons for this, but in short, changing social mores and the growth of mass media and consumer culture, especially in the US, led to a widespread acceptance of makeup. Technological advances meant that makeup could be produced more easily and quickly on a large scale. They also meant increased magazine circulation and radio ads, which fueled a new consumerist society and also the appetite for makeup. And of course, film was very influential in the creation of the mass market for cosmetics. To give you an idea of the growth of the beauty industry, in 1914, Americans were spending $17 million annually on perfume and cosmetics. And by 1921, that number was 72 million. And by 1929, it was 700 million. So essentially, makeup's popularity exploded after World War I. White middle-class women, particularly in the US, where they had gotten the right to vote, expressed a new sense of independence through cosmetics. They had more free time to go to the movies, for a drive, to a dance hall, or just spend time outdoors. They were a lot more visible in public now, and makeup was a way of asserting themselves and their freedom. So along those lines, makeup application was no longer relegated to the bedroom or vanity. and advertising directly linked cosmetics to the leisure activities that women were more fully participating in. So makeup became synonymous with modern femininity, and companies wanted to meet the demand by designing products and packaging that would fit this idea of the new woman and her needs. So many historians describe the primary drive of Art Deco style as a response to industrialization and mass production. And this is very evident in makeup design. The priority for cosmetics in the late 19 teens and early 20s was portability. Previously, makeup products were not designed to be carried. They were intended to sit on one's dressing table because the thought of using makeup on the go or in public was virtually unheard of. But as makeup gained in popularity, companies started introducing vanity cases. And as the modern woman was out and about, she needed a proper case to take with her from daytime activities to nighttime that accommodated her makeup and also went with the new fashions of the time. So there were a lot of chains and straps so that they could be easily carried, and lots of compartments, any number of combinations. So vanity cases held all the makeup a woman might need, and sometimes perfume, cigarettes, or cash. And by 1924, fashion magazines were touting the vanity case as the new must-have accessory. In addition to vanity cases, there was also an increase in double or triple compacts versus older single compacts that typically only held one product. Not only that, an assortment of mechanisms were invented for powder compacts to be spill-proof. Basically, anything that would enhance makeup's portability, along with novelties that would also get attention in an increasingly competitive market, was fair game. Designers tried to find new ways to take makeup with you, some of which were practical, like a retractable powder brush or an illuminated vanity. One of the areas of design that experienced sweeping changes was lighting, as electricity became common. And again, these compacts were meant to accommodate the modern woman who was participating in the relatively new activity of going to the movies. Sometimes the ideas weren't always so practical. I don't think a powder puff and a handkerchief or around the edge of one's skirt would be very convenient. But again, it just shows how designers of this time were thinking about how to make cosmetics easy to carry. So in addition to wearing makeup, women were smoking in public more. Combination compact cigarette cases and lighters were introduced. And this model even has eyebrow pencil. Yes, this Dunhill vanity introduced in 1928. So by 1931, one article noted that the modern compact is living up to its name and bringing as many beauty essentials as possible into as compact a group as possible. So the designs were emblematic of the Art Deco focus on adapting products for the mass market in a modern way. But there was also the aesthetic to consider. Engine turning and mesh represented the embracing of the machine and factory modes of production. And the use of newer, less expensive materials like bakelite made the object look innovative and appealing, but still easily accessible for the average consumer. So dainty floral motifs, engine turn patterns, and painted enamel comprise the overall look of mass-produced compacts and cases through the mid-20s. But that would change very quickly in the later part of the decade. And that's mostly because of the Paris Exposition of 1925, which was very influential in solidifying and disseminating Art Deco style. The La Peur part of the exhibition had fashion, perfume, clothing, accessories, and jewelry. The exposition reinforced Paris as both fashion capital and leader in cosmetics and perfume. Designers came away with a lot of ideas, and packaging rapidly took on a more deco feel. One of the key elements that was applied to makeup was the use of bold color. A lot of compacts were much more brightly painted than they were previously. And another was geometric designs, which were picked up from avant-garde art like Cubism, Futurism, and Constructivism. Helena Rubinstein even had a Cubist lipstick. So these genres had become synonymous with modernity, and the simplified forms lent themselves particularly well to mass production, which is another reason for its popularity in makeup. The motifs commonly associated with Art Deco also were incorporated into packaging after the exposition. We have greyhounds and whippets, which connotated speed and grace, stylized nudes, representing a more liberated attitude towards sexuality. And in the US, skyscrapers and stepped shapes were always a favorite. Unfortunately, there was also the plundering of non-Western cultures, especially Japanese and Chinese. Japanese style and art had been tremendously popular throughout the 19th century in Europe and in the early 1920s. Shanghai had become referred to as the Paris of the East. But no culture was appropriated more than ancient Egypt. Even prior to the opening of King Tut's tomb in 1922, there was always a strong appetite for Egyptian motifs. The Paris exposition was particularly important in getting the new style, not just to artists and architects, but for designers of mass-produced goods and consumers. In 1928, roughly 50 department stores in the US launched displays showcasing the new modern styles based on the ones from the exhibition. And as we get into the 30s, we see a sort of mad scramble among compact manufacturers and makeup companies to update their packaging or add new designs to their existing lineup. And one example of this is De Jair Kiss. The Kissing Fairies design was actually released in 1925 as Art Nouveau was basically over. But 4 years later, the company introduced the vanity Moderne, which, as you can see, is drastically different than the earlier compact. It's about the same size, but much more sleek, and it has a flat engine-turned surface versus the raised surface of the Kissing Fairies. And I don't want to belabor the point too much, but it's really interesting how quickly companies adopted new packaging and advertising to jump on this new style. And as you can see here, these are the one on the left is from the late 20s, and in the early 30s, I think about 1933, this new design came out for Richard Hudnut. And some were actively referring to these new designs as modern or modernistic. So they were really selling this new style. And graphic design really blossomed after the exposition and continued into the 1930s. It had a slightly different flavor in the US. France had a much longer artistic tradition than the US and had a reputation to maintain as the center of the most modern and beautiful cosmetics production in the world. So their graphics, along with those of Italian designers, were a bit more elaborate and sophisticated than the US. Americans had a more pared down, practical approach towards graphic design, as you can see here. One thing that all major companies were doing was hiring artists for their advertising and packaging. This was key as the market became even more saturated. So here we have some from France. We have, the Art Deco influence extended all the way to Japan, where Shiseido completely embraced this new Art Deco style. And then we also have another one, Leonard for Guerlain. Just one of the many artists that produced illustrations and advertising for them. So here is the US side of things. Definitely a more kind of pin-up looking route, but still, these companies were hiring artists as a key part of the packaging and the brand image. And magazines also used the leading illustrators of the time to continue the association between modern style and cosmetics. So as the decade wore on, many of the trends of the 1920s remained the same, due in part to the colonial exposition in Paris in 1931. Cultural appropriation was still rife within makeup packaging and advertising. On the left is a lipstick by a short-lived French company that modeled it in the figure of a Buddhist monk. And on the right is an American brand named Tattoo that fetishized the indigenous people of the South Pacific. In any case, the emphasis on modernity and portability continued. In 1930, Louis Arpels coined the term minaudière and registered the patent in 1933. Designers carried on with cigarette case and lighter combinations and kept experimenting with other things like watches and clocks, jewelry, especially the cuff bracelet, and built-in lipstick mirrors. And one of the most interesting trends was the so-called automatic lipstick. You could open your lipstick with one hand, so no fussing with a swivel tube, which had actually only been patented less than a decade prior. Adoption of the term automatic ties it directly to this new industrial age with its emphasis on machinery and speed. And a lot of companies offered these. I think I showed, no fewer than 6 right here. But one very big break with 1920s makeup design was the stock market crash. The Great Depression meant less expensive materials like Bakelite, Catalin, and Galalith. Catalin was especially popular for jewelry and compacts as it offered many colors. Bakelite and Catalin were usually mixed not with faux gemstones, but wood, chrome, other types of less expensive metal. And Bakelite and Galalith were popular since they could be molded to any form. And chains also started to be removed since that was less expensive to produce. Another big change brought about by the Depression was the rising prominence of industrial designers. Makeup and the ads were being designed not just by jewelers and illustrators, but industrial designers trained to make household goods that would attract customers by tinkering with the design to make the product seem new and novel, even if the basic concept was the same. This would hopefully increase sales. And now new designs weren't just for lipstick, face powder, and rouge, but for eye makeup as well. So you can see here we have a mascara compact with a built-in brush. Again, this is before the days of tube mascara. And the sponge allows it so that you don't have to either spit on your mascara or find water with this built-in sponge. So overall, makeup packaging went in a few different directions. Designers were making seemingly more economical and convenient options like this washable powder puff and black and white lipstick case that went with everything. But there was the other direction of encouraging consumers to buy more. There were still vanity cases, but instead of the all-in-one type case, there was a trend towards separate containers for different categories of makeup. So individual compacts for face powder, rouge, and lipstick sold in sets became the norm rather than being in just one case. Another strategy was planned obsolescence, or the idea that one had to buy new makeup to go with new fashions each season. An offshoot of this was coordinating your makeup to your clothes. So there were things like lipstick wardrobes with a variety of shades, and even products whose packaging was meant to coordinate, like these compacts. And then there were completely unnecessary items like lipstick tissues. These were introduced in the early 30s, presented as an essential since it would be the height of rudeness to leave behind lipstick smears. So throughout the 1930s, there was still the focus on modernity and progress, and that was further emphasized by expositions like the Chicago's World Fair and the Machine Age exhibition at MoMA. And one of the outcomes of this was the concept of streamlining. Streamlining was particularly good for less expensive makeup products, as it offered a new style that stood out from the sharp geometry of previous years and was even easier and cheaper to produce. It was more about contoured lines, rounded edges, and horizontality over verticality. So this Q-Tex manicure set was known as the Trophy and advertised as a streamlined manicure case as modern as tomorrow. I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure Q-Tex was looking at these bookcases that you see on the right. So World War II seemed to have brought an abrupt end to Art Deco. In the years that followed, post-war prosperity and expressions of modernity took a different flavor than they did in 1918. Ads and packaging veered away from elongated forms and moved towards voluptuous pinups. One example is the illustration for Woodbury face powder. After an extensive multi-year research process, Woodbury changed from their slim goddess, who they determined was, quote, sterile and cold, to a curvy, more flesh and blood type Venus figure. Everything got bigger and more excessive, particularly in the US. Companies still produced carryalls and combination sets, but they were a lot bigger and bulkier. And novelty compacts and lipsticks no longer focused on function and practicality. It was really more about the more ridiculous and eye-catching, the better, as the market continued to grow. And there wasn't really much of a revival of Art Deco until the mid to late 60s. There were pop artists like Roy Lichtenstein using it as inspiration, and an exhibition at the Museum of Decorative Arts in Paris. But probably the most important thing in analyzing and codifying the style was a book released in 1968 by art historian Bevis Hellier. And even though there was a lot of popular and academic interest in Art Deco and nostalgia for that era, makeup packaging wasn't really reflecting it. Estee Lauder had one compact in 1969 that they named the Art Deco Compact. But the only major expression of the Art Deco revival evident in cosmetics was Biba. Biba was a fashion brand started by Barbara Hulanicki in 1964. And originally the Biba style was more Victorian and Art Nouveau, but as the brand grew and the company set up a massive department store in an old deco building, Biba essentially led the 20s and 30s revival in fashion. The makeup line was launched in 1970, which incorporated their deco-inspired logo and sleek black and gold packaging. And the makeup was important not just for incorporating a kind of retro look, but it was thoroughly modern on the inside. Biba's products were pretty revolutionary in terms of the colors and the textures. You can see this metallic body paint here. They are also credited with the world's first brown lipstick. So they were very influential in terms of cosmetics history. And throughout the 70s and 80s, there continued to be widespread interest in Art Deco. A lot of period films. The hedonism of disco and Studio 54 was reminiscent of the Roaring 20s. Geometry, bold colors of the 80s. And there were a lot of major museum exhibitions in the US throughout both decades, and the first Art Deco Society was founded in New York City in 1982. But there still wasn't a true revival in cosmetic packaging. Stratton used a pretty iconic illustration for one of their compacts, and I suspect the elevator doors of the Chrysler building for another. And there were a few items that vaguely resembled Art Deco style, like these from the late 80s. But for the most part, there wasn't anything that could be called a revival outside of Biba, which was still sold throughout the 80s and was actually re-released in, I believe, 2014 or 2012. But in any case, even in the 21st century, there are a lot of makeup collections that are vaguely inspired by Art Deco, but again, can't really be called a revival in terms of the packaging. In 2004, Estee Lauder used Urte's Zodiac series for their holiday compacts. And in 2012, makeup artist Lisa Eldridge created a collection for Boots in conjunction with the Great Gatsby film. But again, they're not, really full revivals as we would normally think of them. And it honestly seems like there's a bit of confusion among some companies about what constitutes Art Deco and even the makeup style itself. The palette on the left is part of a collection called the Roaring 20s, but inexplicably contains bright neon shades. And then there's the whole Art Deco brand. This is a German brand established in 1985, but to my knowledge has not done a really authentic Art Deco collection. So having said all that, I think the one that most closely captures the spirit of Art Deco was this collection from Clé de Peau. For holiday 2016, the company collaborated with artist Ashley Longshore, who used the work of Art Deco artist Tamara de Lempicka as her inspiration for the packaging. So that about wraps it up for me for this part of the presentation. And I thought it would be kind of fun to show you some of these objects so you can get a sense of the size and the materials and some of the mechanisms. So let me stop sharing here. So what's on? First up, we have some lipstick matches, which came out in the early 1920s. And actually, this is an entire sales book. This is what the salesman would bring around to businesses. And see if you can get a better view of these, the graphics. So these are very deco graphics, and lipstick matches. They're not actually matches. They are little teeny single-use lipsticks that look like matches. You have to wet your lips first, according to the packaging. So I can show that to you. The other thing that was included in here was tiny little styptic pencils for men's shaving. But I'll give you a sense of what these look like. These are the lipsticks, very deco pattern. And then here are the little matches. And yeah, so businesses would give these away. And then, and actually throughout the 50s, there were a lot of makeup companies that used these for samples. And then more. And here's, I think, another really good illustration of the difference between the 20s and 30s. This is a little bit Art Deco. This is Wink's Cake Mascara. And the girl on it looks, a little bit flapperish. But then when you look at this, this is from the early 1930s. This is, I think, far more deco, at least to my eye. So there's just again, a really big, jump in the packaging and the design. And then a couple of powder boxes from the 30s. These are some of my favorite. We had this Egyptian inspired one. And I love it because not only is it very deco in the woman's face, how she's styled, but there has all of these figures going all the way around the box, which is just a great touch and just really emblematic of the period. And then my other kind of favorite powder box from this era is this Josephine Baker. It's a stylized image of Josephine Baker. I believe it's Bakelite. And it's really interesting because it's kind of too big to be face powder, but not quite big enough to be dusting or body powder. So I'm not really sure what this was for. It is stamped made in England. That's about all I know. So anyway, I love this. Josephine Baker, of course, was very, very iconic and popular for the time. And then we do have an automatic lipstick. We saw the Elizabeth Arden automatic lipstick. And so I have one here. And basically you just push down on the little lever and the lipstick will pop up. So. And then there is another version of this. This one was by Coty, and it came out in 1936, and it is Bakelite, and it was made by a button company based in Connecticut. And it was called the Periscope lipstick. Not sure why, but I found this mechanism to be not quite as smooth as the others. You have to flick off the top and then push down. So not really so automatic. There's that one. And then I think the last thing I have from the 30s, or no, wait, this might actually be from the early 40s. So this is an illuminated vanity. Unfortunately, I cannot get it to work, but I just kind of fell in love with the streamlined look of it. And again, I believe it's Bakelite or some other kind of plastic, but I love that. It's sort of I got this skyscraper motif, but again, in that streamlined kind of late 30s fashion. You can see it open, and there's where the light would be. Again, unfortunately, I can't seem to get the right battery for the bulb, but yeah, but that's one example of these illuminated compacts. And then, yes, actually, this is the last thing from the 30s. Here we have the Q-Tex trophy manicure set. So it was a lot smaller than I thought it would be when it finally showed up. I ordered this from eBay, and but still, it has that sort of streamlined, kind of rounded, horizontal affect to it. And inside you have, I think, cuticle remover and polish remover and polish. So it's this little set. And then a couple of, I guess, revival things. Here is Biba. This is, it's a crayon set from, I believe, the mid-late 70s. So again, while the packaging, it looks, the black and gold and the logo looks very sleek and, definitely reminiscent of the 1920s. The inside and the crayons are very much part of that kind of late 60s, early 70s style. And Mary Quant actually also had a crayon set. So this is really interesting to see it done in a slightly different way. To see, Mary Quant and Biba, they both had such vastly different styles, but we're doing, kind of the same thing in terms of trying to make it more fun and really thinking outside the box in terms of colors and textures. And then this blush, it is by a brand called Rachel Perry, and this came out in the early 1980s. It is meant to be an all-natural brand that use ingredients that were supposed to be good for your skin. This particular one is the chamomile blush, and the packaging is really interesting. It's sort of deco, but it's really kind of the pop art deco psychedelic kind of 60s version. And I just thought it was really strange for the time. This does not look early 80s to me at all. So just a very interesting relic of its time. And then lastly, we do have another Clé de Peau piece. This is a compact that was inspired by Art Deco jewelry. And inside is a highlighter with the same kind of sunburst pattern. And I believe this was from holiday 2010. So that's, yeah, Clé de Peau really seems to enjoy the Art Deco. And then the last thing I wanted to show was just a quick comparison here. We have this very nice slim compact. This is from 1929 or so. And it has the lipstick and rouge and face powder. Oops. And you could see, you know, it's pretty small. It's very, very slim. So you can see how slim that is. And then this one is from the 50s. And as you can see, it's really kind of bulky compared to this one. You know, and this one is a cigarette case, obviously, given the design. But you know, even so, you can tell it's just, you know, it's kind of boxy and just not quite as sleek. So yeah, it's just an example of the, you know, how the shapes and the sizes all kind of changed. So yeah, I think that's it for me. I can take some questions.
Thanks, Hilary. That was fascinating. I really love those little matchbooks. They're so cool. Anyway, I did say at the beginning that this is my first time hosting, and I completely forgot that we were on webinar mode. So you need to put questions in the little Q&A box at the top, not the chat box. Apologies for me making that mistake. So please put your questions. You've already had one comment saying how fabulous they are. But also, I'll ask a question while we're waiting for some. I really like the look of those 1980s, the Elizabeth Taylor, and the other one, I can't remember the name, Aziza or Azizi or something like that. What's their origin? Was that just something that was fashionable, or did they come out because they were linked to something, or do you know anything more about their antecedents?
You know, Joe, I went on kind of like a wild goose chase trying to find information on them. Asisa goes back a long time, I think at least to the 1960s. Why they did that particular design in the late 80s, I'm not sure, because none of their other packaging really looks like that. And then the Liz Taylor actually came out with a perfume called Passion in 1987, and I was able to date that eyeshadow compact to about 1989. And again, if you look at and I probably should have included a picture, but if you look at the Passion bottle, it does look very 80s, but you know, there still is that kind of strange kind of Art Deco sense about it. It's got like those very sharp kind of rays. And I think you can kind of see that a little bit in the eyeshadow palette. But as far as I know, that was not a whole line. I think it was the makeup was only a gift with purchase. So it wasn't really even like a widespread line. So in any case, I think that was pretty short-lived. But yeah, again, I tried to find, you know, what inspired her. I even tried to look up like the bottle and everything to see whether they were looking at, you know, 20s and 30s, but I couldn't find any evidence. So not really sure what was going on there.
I love how the even the makeup itself has the kind of stylized lines on it. Anyway, we've got some questions now. One which was related to my question, so I'll take that first, from Pandora Harrison. Certainly in the 80s, the UK had the new romantic music style tribe. I think I was part of that. And they favoured an Art Deco theme in some of their fashion. So I'm not surprised some of the early 80s cosmetics had that styling to appeal to the music, fashion and style. So I wondered, I don't know if you know anything about perhaps those links, or whether you've discovered anything that explicitly links that together. Certainly that was a time when lots of men started wearing makeup as well, I think, on a day-to-day basis.
You know, I actually don't. I have not heard much about that. I will say though that Biba was pretty instrumental in, again, making makeup more popular for men, because she offered these really unconventional colors, again, like the brown lipstick and you know, really kind of strange nail polish colors that you really could not get anywhere else. So I do think, throughout the 70s and the 80s, Viva was really influential in that. But in terms of, the actual link between those various subcultures, I'm not sure if they were looking at Art Deco or not. Yeah, but that would be interesting to think about. Again, I think too, I'm based in the US, and so many of the things I'm finding is, obviously very, very focused on American cosmetics history versus, UK. So that would be a great area to explore, though.
I read an interview recently with Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran, and his dad apparently thought he would grow out of wearing makeup, but he's still wearing it, and now he's 64. So, so I have another question here from Lorna McCulloch. You mentioned that films influenced the use of makeup. Other than Josephine Baker, and I love the fact that Josephine Baker had a Bakelights box. That's quite cool, I like the alliteration. Did any other 20s and 30s film stars have any of their own ranges, or were they associated with any particular brands?
Oh, that's a good question. I know, and just real quickly about Josephine Baker, that image was used of her. I don't know if she was actually involved in the design. I can tell you, though, that she did have her own line. It was called Baker Fix, and it was hair pomade and a tanning oil. So she did have that. There was another line called Lola Montez. And Lola Montez was actually a 19th century dancer, not an actress, but still they were using that, again, long after she died, again, to, associate these cosmetics with glamour. The other one I can think of is Edna Wallace Hopper. And again, I don't know if she was actively involved in the creation of her line, or if they just permitted a company to use her likeness. So those are the three off the top of my head. I think that might be it for now, but I'm sure there probably are more hiding out there.
Sorry, we're giving you loads more research to do through these questions.
Yeah, no, I love it.
Then we've got a question from Lucy Santos. Thanks, Hilary, that was great. But I had a question about the winks with the 20s and 30s. Is the product size different, or is it just the packaging? Maybe it was to do with cost saving at the time of the Depression, or did they make it more streamlined on purpose? Or maybe it was a bit of both.
That's a great question, Lucy. Okay, so I'm looking at them now, and actually I probably put them up here. Oh my goodness, yeah, the here, let me turn that background off. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, if you look at the one from the 1930s, it is considerably smaller. See if I can get the other one up here. I think the brush is going to come out. Oh, no. Well, I dropped my gloves. Oh, well. So yeah, you can see, and it's not just the packaging, it's the, yeah, the product is definitely bigger. So yeah, that could also be it too. That's very, very good eye.
Lucy's replied, less room to spit on it.
Yeah.
So I've got two more questions. What was the spark for you to start the makeup museum?
Oh, so, I was noticing that there wasn't, I guess, any kind of online or any space really, just for cosmetics. We had so many fashion museums. We have decorative arts museums, which, and design museums, which sometimes include makeup objects. And, again, the V&A, they've got a fantastic collection. But there wasn't really anything just for cosmetics. And, I was also an art history major. I've always been really fascinated with, design and packaging. And I just thought, why not? There needs to be a space just for makeup, because, the the design and the history is just so rich, and it goes back literally thousands of years. And I just thought we need a space for that.
That's cool. I wish I had the time to indulge some of my pastimes in that way. So Pandora's come up with another really great question. Seems like you guys could probably have your own off Zoom chat. Having read War Paint about the rivalry between Helena Rubinstein and Elizabeth Arden, would you say that rivalry led to more innovation, not only in product, but also packaging and gimmicks like the automated lipstick?
I think so. Yeah. And it wasn't just them competing. I mean, the competition was really, really fierce between everybody. They were also competing with Max Factor a little bit later on, Revlon. But yeah, I absolutely think that that sort of competition fueled innovation. And, they all had to, if someone came out with a good idea, then they all had to do it then, because in their eyes, they might not be competitive. What was really interesting, though, is years later, Charles Rebson said, let everyone else release these new products first, and then you come out with your version that completely, ironed out all of the kinks. Let them get it wrong, and then you bring out, your perfected product to market. So that's how he handled competition. So yeah, and there was a lot of competition that was fueling innovation, and honestly, though, like a lot of copycat designs too. So
I'm sure. So another really interesting question here. You were wearing gloves when you were handling the makeup. So do you have a special way of storing it so that the makeup doesn't degrade?
I wish I did. Unfortunately, the collection is housed in my home. So for right now, I am still working on getting archival boxes and, proper materials to help make sure it doesn't degrade. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, it is makeup. It's not meant to be permanent. Then again, we have, archaeologists have found face creams from 5,000 years ago and are still able to analyze the ingredients. So I try not to worry about it too much. Yes, ideally, I would, love to have, proper archival packaging and storage for it to help it degrade a little bit less quickly. But again, it's makeup, and it does present a unique challenge.
Any tips for us in trying to preserve our own things we may have collected?
Yeah, I mean, just keep it away from light and heat. Those are the usual ones. Again, especially kind of any cream products, because the wax and any other kind of softer ingredients will melt. So yeah, don't store it in your bathroom. And again, if you can get proper kind of acid-free paper, that would be good too. And the other reason why I use gloves for most things is because metal and plastic, it tends to get pretty fingerprinty. And again, that can actually degrade the outer materials over time. So yeah, if it's something you want to collect and you want to hang on to for a while, yeah, use gloves and yeah, and bubble wrap too, depending if you have enough. But the Clé de Peau powder that I showed you, it's got this beautiful embossing. I'm terrified of dropping these types of things and just have it shattering everywhere. So yeah, if you can also bubble wrap for the more kind of fragile things.
I'm sure, and actually that lead nicely onto the next question, which I've got here, which is how about wearing it? But I guess some of it looks so beautiful and pristine in the packaging. You don't actually want to, but could you?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, it depends on when it's from. Obviously, I would not go trying out things from anything older, I would say, than like 10 years. I would not go trying it on your face. That's a really bad idea. You could swatch it on your hands for fun. I mean, I've done that. But no, I would not recommend wearing it. If one of the things, and I really try not to do this because obviously it's very expensive, but if you see something that you love, that it's got this beautiful embossing on it and you don't want to ruin it, you can get one, to, collect, and then one to actually wear. Personally, it's too hard for me to do that. And I'm like, oh, I can find something else that isn't, so embossed, and, I'll just wear something a little bit that I won't mind dipping a brush into. So.
Indeed. Another question, again, going into the depths of your knowledge. I was surprised to see Outdoor Girl included in your talk. I had no idea that this brand was that old. Can you tell me when Outdoor Girl first started?
Oh, that's another one I didn't actually get all the details on. I do want to say it was like late 20s, early 30s. And again, I do think it was, directly influenced by, this new image of, of the woman going outdoors and, going to the beach, golfing, playing tennis. And, it's not to say that women didn't do these things before, but, in the 20s, they had more free time and, more disposable income. So they were able to do these things. And I also think, it was a selling point. It was, this powder, no matter what you're doing, if you're an outdoor girl, don't worry, your powder will still stay on. This is the powder for you. So, but yeah, long story short, no, I'm not sure the exact date, but I do think it goes back to the 20s.
One of our attendees has handily looked it up and has told us that it's 1928. So
okay.
So there you go. So we've got one
Excellent.
last here, I think, before we run out of time. Hi, I'm Amanda. Really interesting talk. I wondered about Max Factor, the man and the makeup.
Okay. Well, I don't know specifically about him. There are two biographies of him, and he was tremendously influential. I do know that in 1920, which I think is relevant for the what we were talking about. In 1920, he did start his Society line, which was the line for the mass market. It wasn't his kind of own concoctions that he was using for actresses. This was the line that was meant for the average woman. Although he didn't sell it that way, he sold it as, now you can get the same makeup as your favorite actress. And obviously calling it society makeup, I think he was trying to attract upper middle class clientele. Yeah, I don't quite know what else to tell you about Max Factor, other than again, there's a wealth of good resources out there on him. And I do feel like, and I guess the only other thing I would add is, I wasn't really seeing too much Deco, or at least it was, the very kind of pared down kind of, I guess, design that we were seeing. I know that his packaging from this era was, very plain black with a gold line kind of down the middle and like a silhouette of one of those like theater masks. So it was just kind of a very plain, like kind of gold outline against gold packaging. So I guess that was maybe his version of Deco. I'm not sure.
I think we might be able to fit, I think we have one more question. Might be able to fit that in. Just let me scroll down. Besame, BESEME, is one of the more recent cosmetic countries trying to emulate vintage cosmetics. I really appreciate their attention to detail. I hope you will add them to your collection. That's nice.
Yeah, thank you.
So I really want to thank you, Hilary. That talk was fascinating, and the talk itself was fascinating, but I think most people like me will have really enjoyed your actual showing us the makeup. Tomorrow I'm going to tell everybody about those matchbooks. The matchbooks were really, really cool. So thank you so much for doing that. Before you go, I'd like to remind everybody that we have more events coming up. We have a Art Deco and early 20th century design guided walking tour around Manchester on the 25th of March. And we have our next webinar, the Art Deco Reader Chapter 2, and that's online on the 27th of April. And we have some coming soon events, a guided tour of Leeds on the 13th of May, and Art Deco and Textiles coming up, and I just get the date, on the 23rd of May, and you'll be able to book those on the 1st of April. You can go to the website and find all of the information. So Hilary, again, I really want to thank you. Absolutely fascinating talk. Not really a bit of Art Deco that I knew a lot about, but tomorrow I should be going off to bore everybody with what I learned. And we seem to give you a lot of things to go off and research as well. So
yes,
I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
No worries. Good night, everybody.
Right.
Good night.
Good night.